Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi, and I am really happy today because we have a guest. I've been a fan of his for over 30 years. He's done many things in his career, done a bunch of different projects, but of course, to many fans across the world, he will be known affectionately as Sean, the leader of the cult classic, The Monster Squad. And this, of course, is Andre Gower. And Andre, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real honor for me, and I've really been looking forward to it. So thank you so much.
Thanks for inviting me. Fun to be here and chat for a little bit, for sure.
So, Andre, I believe you started acting around 5 years old, and you kind of landed a part on a very successful soap opera, The Young and the Restless. You know, that's had tremendous actors over the years. I think of Peter Bergman. I think of God, his name escapes me, but it'll come to me. But a very popular show, especially at the time when you landed that part. I mean, that show was really one of the big, probably CBS's number one soap. So just talk about that experience a little bit. I believe you played a character by the name of Brooks.
That's correct. Yeah, it was. I think I was probably 9 or 10. I was on for a year or two, and yeah, right, kind of in the early mid '80s. Daytime dramas had. There was a ton of them. There was, now we only have what, two or three left, and back then I think there was a dozen or so, and then they had the primetime soaps as well. But it was just one of those things where they were looking to add this another person to play this character, because at the time on Young and Restless there used to be three kind of prominent families. Now there's just two, and there was the Abbotts, the Newmans, and the Prentice family, and I happened to be the Prentice family. And throughout the run, Brooks, being a little tyke, actually, kind of had a lot to do. Sometimes on these soaps, they give some stuff for the kids to do, and plant some seeds for future decades, I guess, because people stay on these shows forever. And too bad Brooks didn't continue, because who knows, that could have been a 30-year legacy on Young and Restless, and I would have been totally fine with that. But my plot line with this family was there was like this matriarch grandmother, I believe, and then there was some offspring there, and there was two main couples, Lance and Laura, and Luke and Leslie, I believe, and right. I was the son. The trick was that my entire life, all 9 or 10 years of it on this show, I thought my parents were actually my aunt and uncle, and my aunt and uncle were actually my mother and father. So that was the very soapy part of that storyline. And then, I guess the powers that be with, taking the show forward decided to actually just get rid of this family. So they, my last episode was one of like that family's last episode, because they kind of do the reveal, and Brooks runs away and gets lost and looks for his dad and finds him in the mountain cabin and almost drowns in a lake. And, so it was almost like a cliffhanger if Brooks died and drowned in the lake or not, but we end up finding him. And so he's just fine. And then the family moves to Europe.
Now, let me ask you, Andre, were you able to ever do any scenes with Jean Cooper? Because she was a long time member of that show. Probably when you think of The Young and Restless, you got to put her name right up there. And I mean, she really was, you talk about the matriarch, she was really the matriarch of that show. So just let me ask you, did you get to do any scenes with her?
If I believe, maybe in like some like ensemble scenes, because I know there was some like party scenes, and there was like a big trial at one time where I was a key witness. Because the grandmother on the Prentice side, we need some Y&R experts here if I remember, but the grandmother ended up jumping off of the high rise and killing herself, but she had typed a note with gloves on the typewriter, blaming it on somebody else or something like that. And I was the witness that saw grandma typing in black gloves, which I thought was weird. So I kind of was like the case breaking witness, I think, if I remember correctly. But Jean Cooper for sure. If I didn't have direct scenes with her on camera, when you shoot a soap, it runs so fast. You do an episode a day, and everybody's there. So it's just sort of like this crazy, fast paced environment. And so someone like Gene Cooper and Eric Braeden and folks like that were all original cast members, even way before I was even had my blip on it. And yeah, talk about icons. Those are TV icons for sure.
Definitely. And the thing too about you kind of touched on it a little bit, but you would think as a young kid, maybe you're not getting a lot of scenes, but they really do rely on the kids a lot in those soap operas. They play a big part because uh, they are the future of those families. They're going to get older, and eventually, what they do is they make the character go from age 8 to like age 18. That's been done forever, but they
Yeah.
really play a part. So they really utilize the kids. So I'm sure, like you said, I mean, you had a lot of scenes, and there weren't just weeks where you didn't work. You were working a lot back then.
Yeah, if I remember, it was great, to be, kind of that active on that show. Just remember, I had to get up. You have to get up very early to get to work, which is what I remember vividly. And as a 9 or 10-year-old, no one likes to get up before the sun's up. So it's I remember those mornings very very well. But it's fast paced. It's high level. Even though people give a lot of they kind of turn their nose up to kind of daytime. But like you said, a lot of big faces, a lot of huge names, did a turn or got started on daytime. It's great work. It's great experience. It's great learning. And you're doing a show a day, and you get a script at the end of Monday for tomorrow's episode, and then about 10 o'clock at night, there's a knock on the door, and a courier's dropped off the rewrites. So you got to learn that late at night, and then you could show up in the morning, and there's rewrites before breakfast, and so it's one of those things where you learn very quickly how to do stuff in a fast-paced environment, and because there's no slowing down. Like there's no you got to keep moving, and I think that was one of the things that I took away from that, and that kind of translates to anything on set or in front of the camera with kids, because adults usually don't like to work with kids. Productions don't like to work with kids. It's the old saying, don't work with kids and animals. And and there's a reason. Sometimes they can lag behind, they can have a bad day, they're not professional, they're just kids. I mean, they're kids, it's not their fault. Sometimes it's just kids being kids. But so I learned at a very young age that you got to know where to stand, know what you're supposed to say, and know how to do it, and don't be the reason something goes bump.
Right, exactly. Let me ask you, Andre. This is a lot of actors I talk to kind of give me the same answer, but did you have to do a lot of commercials in the beginning to kind of get your feet wet? I mean, did you do I know Don Most told me he did like 3 or 4 McDonald's commercials. Did you do commercials before you really got that first big break?
Well, not only just before, but all continuously through. I mean, commercial work back in the day was really kind of a mainstay of a lot of everybody's, kind of resume. And my sister was in the business. She's a little older than I am, and she worked quite a bit when she was a kid as well. And we actually, did a bunch of commercials together, ironically, which worked out well. But yeah, I did. I think we stopped counting when we got to close to like 60 or 70 commercials or something like that, because it was. One, it's good work. It's a couple days at a time, sometimes a day at a time. But I was very lucky at one point. You do all the requisite stuff. You do, not only commercials, but a lot of print work too. So you do a lot of photo shoots for, brochures and magazines and flyers and newspapers, things like that, which, this is way pre-internet. So things got printed, for the sale at Macy's. And, but commercials were, I mean, a giant chunk of it, to be honest. And, I was very fortunate at one point that I was sort of one of the go-to kids with a huge ad company called Ogilvy and Mather, which was this legacy kind of ad agency, and Mattel was their big client at the time, or probably had been since the 50s. And for some reason, I just started doing a bunch of Mattel commercials out of Ogilvy and Mather's office, and then it got to the point where I didn't audition for these commercials, but I had to go to all the auditions to sit in the room with the other kids, and then we would go and introduce a new toy, whether it was Hot Wheels or some motorcycle thing, or I did, I don't know, a dozen Masters of the Universe commercials or something like that. And I was even they had a toy line called Poochie, which was for girls at the time, and I happened to be the Poochie kid. So it was a lot of print work for that too, but also all these live action commercials. It's a lot of work. You show up. You end up one day you could do 2 commercials a week if you're burning it. Yeah.
Right. And interestingly enough, Andre, like if an adult's watching a TV show and there's the commercial breaks, a lot of times they may flip the channels and stuff like that. But you being a child and doing toy commercials, most kids don't change the channel. Number one, because they're just, that they don't want to miss anything when the show comes back. But especially when they start seeing the toy commercials advertised and stuff, they get into that. So you really play a big part because a lot of times those commercials are a big reason that kids fall in love with those toys.
I mean, without a doubt. I mean, it's the impression that the visual and the sounds and the music and what the kids are doing in these ads. I mean, there's very educated, very smart people that do marketing and advertising because they know it works on the human brain, and which translates into the human mind and makes you behave in certain manners. Where it's like, I want that, or I need that, or I feel like I need to follow up with the second version of this. And yay market economy world. That's what it's all about, is buying stuff. Or if at the time we had the soda wars with Coke and Pepsi. Toys are always coming out with new stuff, but you had soda wars, and which I did Coke commercials, and I did Pepsi commercials, but you have to wait. Usually if you do one, you can't do the rival one for like 2 years or something. Right. Even though you're not a named spokesperson, it's just your face as a kid. But a lot of fast food commercials, Burger King, McDonald's, they're all vying for that, hey, I saw that ad and I want a quarter pounder instead of a Whopper. So it's very influential on the human mind.
Definitely is. So Andre, let me ask you this. You're a young kid and you're trying to find work, but at the same time, you're still a kid. So, I mean, you're not an adult yet. When you got these guest starring roles, I mean, were you excited a lot of times working with the different actors doing the different shows? Because I can think of one show you did. I think you might have done 1 or 2 episodes, and that was the A-Team. So you're a young kid getting a chance to work on a show with Mr. T. I mean, talk about that experience. How was that for you?
First of all, you are, it depends on kind of how you look at it as the person. Are you a kid first, or are you a professional actor first?
Right.
And you can kind of, I guess after the fact, it's easy to come from both perspectives. But getting an opportunity to do, I was very fortunate to do a ton of guest star roles on some cool shows, that most people, would love to be on. And yeah, something like the A-Team, I think it was season 2 or something, or season 3. And, so we had all seen the show. So we loved this show, and Mr. T's this icon. And, to be honest, Mr. T scared the shit out of me in Rocky 3. So it's like, I was like, a Clubber Lang I'm not a fan of. But, he's not that guy. He's actually a phenomenal actor and a great entertainer. And, what a great show. The A-Team, they go around, they shoot guns and they blow stuff up and no one gets hurt. And they win one for the little guy, every 54 minutes. So it's pretty good. But I remember reading for that. And, not only was that cool, I think we played lumberjacks. So, we got to go up in the woods and chop down trees and, be running around the mountains of, California with the A-Team. I mean, what's not better than that? And you kind of kid out a little bit. It's neat. It's fascinating, but you're also there to work. And, there's a lot of stuff going on. And again, being the only kid in the production, you don't want to be the reason something goes bump or gets held up or something goes wrong. So you just try to do your best and make sure you know what you're doing.
Right. And I think of another series that you were fortunate enough to get a guest role on, because I thought this was probably the most underrated show of the 1980s, and that was St. Elsewhere. And you got to do an episode of that. And I mean, you talk about just wonderful writing and the way those actors played those parts. I mean, the doctors, the nurses, everybody, I mean, they played it so well. And I mean, you got to be part of that. So just talk about working with guys like William Daniels, Ed Flanders, Norman Lloyd, who lived to be 106 years old, which is just remarkable. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, the St. Elsewhere, obviously was a giant show, big, Emmy Award winning, great writers, big network thing. And, the hospital settings, along with kind of lawyer ensemble dramas, are always kind of you can't ever go wrong with them. I mean, you can, but it's if you get a good staff that's creating these characters and then good actors, hospital shows seem to work. And growing up, my favorite show of all time, including today, my favorite show of all time is the old paramedic emergency room show called Emergency.
Yeah,
about the firefighters, which was not only fun because as kids we all want to be firemen, but it was actually very historical. And they were doing that show actually at the same time that the state of California, was actually implementing the paramedic program. It was a brand new thing, and they were using the show as sort of kind of like a boost piece for it and an experiment. But I loved the show. And then you translate, 10 years later or so, and you have something like St. Elsewhere with this ensemble cast, which are all just kind of these precursors and primers for things like, ER and Grey's Anatomy. And, you get into all this drama and these character development stories. But look who came off, like you're saying, look who came off St. Elsewhere. You got David Morse, you got Denzel Washington, you got, Eric Laneville, who went on to just direct everything in the world.
Tremendous director, too.
William Daniels, who goes way, way back. And then, St. Elsewhere and then way, way forward. He was also the voice of Kit on Knight Rider.
Yeah, which you also were on.
Which I also did. Yeah, so it was good. But the St. Elsewhere thing, I remember, I think I read, there was an episode of, I think it was like the hospital gets shut down in a blizzard or something. Yeah. And I think there was other roles of kids in that show that I read for, and I just ended up getting this kind of side piece, which was only like one scene or two, but it was with David Morse, who, went on to, be great on that show and then just go do a million things. And, he kind of takes me aside and helps this kid out because we're all trapped in the ER room. Yeah. And, if you watch the show, probably, truth be told, for, when I was like 10 or 11, when I did that episode, maybe, St. Elsewhere was probably a little highbrow for you as a 10-year-old, but you've seen it, you watch it, the names and faces. Then, but a few years later, you're like, yeah, that was a good show. That whole series run, that was some, some deep, some serious stuff, dealt with some issues. And, it was one of those kind of landmark shows that set the tone for, network ensemble dramas going forward.
Absolutely. And I think about this too, Andre. Sometimes less is more. And you did one episode, I believe, of the Hogan family, and I think you were nominated for a Saturn award. So, I mean, doing only one episode, you make that big of an impression on people that are watching it. So, I mean, you have to take advantage of those opportunities, and they may be just one-time opportunities, but they could really lead to bigger things. And I mean, you probably never think as a young 12, 13-year-old kid, you're going to be nominated for an award, and you're on an episode and you're being nominated. That'd be a great feeling as well for you.
Well, I mean, anytime you get recognized for something like, Saturn Awards or Youth and Film Awards or things like that, it's always nice. That's good because, there is a lot of kids out there doing a lot of work. And I feel like I was fortunate enough to probably be in the, of all the kids, the wide range of kids that were, in my age range and, preteen, teen, older teen years, of all those kids. I mean, there's hundreds of kids, reading for parts every day. And I would say about 20% of the kids do 80% of the work. And that means they're just getting constantly cast and thinking just kind of, because there's a reason. And I feel like I was fortunate enough to probably be in that 20%, because there's a ton of kids. But to come up and do something that ends up getting recognized or people talk about, that's fantastic. You mentioned the Hogan family, which was a great thing because I had just come off another series for 2 seasons that ended on, it was one of the first shows.
Mr. President, I believe.
Yeah,
right?
Mr. President.
Yeah, that was a very underrated show as well. Yeah,
it was. I think it probably needed a little more time. It had way too many forces of nature at work behind the scenes going on with that show. I think it was kind of an experiment with George C. Scott coming to television and dealing with that kind of gravitas. It was fantastic. I mean, what a great kind of experience. But, it went for 2 seasons. It was one of the first shows on Fox as a network. It was one of the first 6 or 8 shows. Yeah. And then, coming out of that and then joining the cast of the Hogan family, I actually did a handful of episodes because it was a recurring character that the younger brothers, Danny Ponce, Mark and Will, Danny Ponce and Jeremy Licht, who I'm still friends with today. We all grew up together and they've been on the show forever, since day one. I get to join this cast because they were bringing in a friend from the neighborhood for those 2 characters. Because Jason Bateman's character had 2 buddies
Right.
And they were getting older, and
Tommy
they're
Hodges. Yep.
yeah,
Steve
it's Tom
Whitting.
Hodges
Yeah.
and Steve Whitting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and they were hilarious on the show, especially Steve Whitting was just
Oh yeah, he
absolutely a
was great.
comic
Yeah.
face. And I think what was happening at that time, they were getting, older in their high school years and going off to college, I think. And so they were trying to add something for Mark and Willie to have, a buddy from school or from the neighborhood. And that was me. And I ended up playing this character, for a handful of episodes, and it was supposed to continue on for the next couple of seasons. And for some reason or other, or not, or forces that came in and said we want to go in a different direction. They took that character out. But I think his name was Steve, and
Yes.
it's kind of cool, kind of the bad influence type of kid, which is always fun to play. Because those kids are so kind of straight laced and coming out of that good house, and it just sort of had a little edge to them. And that was super fun to play, because that was, I was an older teenager at the time. We were all in high school and we're all friends, and it's just different work experience, and that was fun. I wish that had continued for a few more seasons like it was supposed to.
Yeah, it really would have been. And the other thing too about that show, which I thought killed that show as well, is they got moved to CBS their final season, and I just think like a lot of times, I could be wrong, but a lot of times when you get different writers and they start changing things up, that's when the shows tend to lose their rhythm and jump the shark. And I really thought that happened with that show because, like you said, they eliminated your character. If you remember, they got rid of Tommy Hodges' character. He came back maybe for one more episode. But when you start doing that, the fans, they start to feel betrayed a little bit and they stop watching the show.
No doubt. And, even if it's just like a, kind of internal network change and they go in some different direction, or a lot of shows at that time, would get canceled and another network would pick it up. And, that's always kind of a weird thing, because especially if you have a legacy network show, let's say on ABC, and it gets canceled and it goes to CBS, that's not going to be the same writers. It's not going to be the same, kind of creative team or the people putting kind of the meat into, the stories or the characters, because they haven't been around for, the last 3, 4, 5, 10 seasons. And it makes a difference. Not that these new writers are bad writers. They just haven't had the hand, on the rudder of these characters for, the last couple of seasons. And they're the writers of a long-term show are the ones that give, these characters what the audience is, expecting and what they feel comfortable with. And you change that up drastically, or even just a little bit, audiences can tell. They get it.
Yeah, they definitely do. So let's talk about the Monster Squad. And number one, if I remember correctly, Andre, I got to go back and watch the DVD. It's been a lot of years, but you originally wanted to be the character Rudy. Am I correct in that? You thought he was the real cool guy and you really wanted to get that part?
Well, he is the coolest character.
Yeah,
He's one of the coolest characters of the era. But it was actually that's the role I auditioned for. I never auditioned for the role of Sean Crenshaw, and
right.
I went in. If you look at my body of work leading up to Monster Squad, it was a handful of things that kind of had a lot of hair product and a leather jacket or two, or some cool clothes and some swagger and some attitude, and so that was just sort of like an obvious fit for the character description coming in, to your agent's desk. And when they get submitted, to go read for these roles, and I got asked to come in and read for Rudy. And I, read, I went to call back. We screen tested, a handful of times, all for the role of Rudy. And, then didn't hear anything for, a couple weeks. And, which isn't abnormal, but usually if you don't hear something that you've gone that deep into an audition process halfway soon, then it probably didn't happen. But a few weeks go by, and they called, and they said, hey, that movie you read for, you got, congratulations, you got cast. And but it's not the role. Well, first question is like, well, which project are you talking about? Because back in the day, we're auditioning for multiple things almost every day. And it was that monster movie, the Monster Squad, but you didn't get the role that you read for. And usually that's bad news for an actor, or lesser news. It's great to be cast in something, but they're like, someone else got the role that you read for, but they liked you, so you usually get a smaller or a side role because they still want you involved. And I immediately was trying to, because by that time I had read the script and
And you liked it,
Like,
yeah.
I was like, well, what other role is there? And that's lesser. I'm like, oh man. And they're like, no, you actually got they straight cast you as the lead. You are the lead of this movie. And I was like, but I never auditioned for that. And they're like, I know, this is kind of interesting. And I was a little bummed because Rudy, like you said, was the cool character, and
Yeah.
got to kill all the monsters, got the girl at the end, had the good hair, was the cool kid, gets to save Horace, which is a great story. And but I know why I didn't get cast as Rudy. Years late, we know why, because Ryan Lambert walks into that audition and absolutely nails it and becomes
Yeah.
Rudy, in that moment. But luckily, with the small group of people making decisions for that film, whether it was Fred Decker or Peter Hyams or Shane Black or Penny Perry, the casting director, someone said, "Hey, we've got to pick someone for the lead role here. Who's that going to be?" And look, they read everybody in town for these roles, and including Sean. And without coming in and reading lines for it or having another meeting, they just straight said, "We want you as Sean, and that's what you're going to take on." And knowing how everything went, years later, I think everybody ended up in the exact right spot.
And the ironic thing about it, Andre, is you're disappointed because you want the character of Rudy, but you are playing the top star of this movie. I mean, when you look at the credits, your name comes first before anybody else's because you're playing the lead character, Sean. He's a young, probably I would say they had him 11 or 12 years old at the time, and he's basically got to get this club, this group of guys, and stop these monsters and stuff like that. So even though you didn't get to play the cool kid, you still got to be the lead role, and that had to be a great feeling for you, even though it wasn't the role that you originally wanted.
Oh yes, sort of the burn of not getting the cool role. That healed up pretty quick once once you realize that this is a giant studio picture that it's a big budget. It's got monsters and explosions and chases and werewolves blowing up in midair, and you realize that it's okay. It's like you're in a good spot. Yeah, for sure.
Right. And 2 years before that, Goonies had come out, and Goonies just captured the imagination of people. People loved that movie. I mean, they were so in love with it, and it's still popular today. And then you guys come out with Monster Squad in 1987, and I know at the box office it didn't do as well as I think people wanted it to do. But I mean, God, you got to look back at it now, and 36 years later, this thing is huge. I mean, it's still popular. You guys have probably gotten more notoriety for the aftermath of the movie than you ever did when the movie was going on. So, I mean, it's got to be a great feeling because that movie was a tremendous movie. And I was always kind of disappointed that it didn't get the reviews it should have got because people just didn't go to see it at the time.
All true. Yes. It was a victim of a number of things. I think years later, as we interrogated a little bit of why it didn't perform at the box office. When we were making the documentary, Wolfman's Got Nards, we kind of got into that a little bit and realized there was a number of factors that were probably hindrances to Monster Squad being successful at the box office. And it's fascinating to see something that you work a long time on, work a lot of hours, and you wait, 8 or 9 months for it to come out. And then it has this very, not stellar release. And, if you remember back in that era, it's not really different today, but it's definitely back in that day when a movie gets released on print, it's very expensive to go wide release. The studios and the theater chains will come up with an arbitrary number, a line that your movie has to cross with, ticket sales for revenue that, will extend its life in the theaters. If it doesn't reach this number, then it gets pulled and it's gone. And I think that number was probably, and what happens, unfortunately, back in that day is you had about 48 to 72 hours to hit that mark.
Yeah.
And with movies that are very specific to a specific group of people, sometimes it's a word of mouth thing, and you have to wait till next weekend for it to kind of catch up, and someone go back to the schoolyard and say, "Hey, Mikey, I just saw this awesome movie on Saturday. I'm going to go back next Saturday and see it. You got to come with me." And then little Mikey was like, "Yeah, I'll go with you. That sounds awesome." and then you go to the mall or you ride down to the dual theater on your bikes, and the movie's not there the next weekend because it didn't perform from Friday to Sunday. And that's where a lot of kids, got stymied with Monster Squad, because I think if it had just been able to hang on for another week or two in each town, it would have caught on more. But it became this kind of ethereal, weird thing where a group of weird kids said, I just saw this really fun movie. And then kids would go see, and they're like, movie didn't exist. You're lying. You're a weirdo.
Yeah.
So it just makes the misfit, kind of moniker go even further. But then it came out on HBO and at the local video store and just blew up at the time for a very small amount of time, and really hit a group of fans very, very deeply that we didn't know that happened, because the movie came, went, and it was gone, and we were off to other things. And this cool thing that we did, that we thought we'd have action figures and a sequel and all this other stuff, didn't happen because you didn't reach that number after 48 hours. And, that kind of sucks. Like I said, interrogating it, making Wolfman's Got Nards, the documentary, we see a couple other factors that kind of played a role in that, being the marketing campaign, being the timing. Most importantly, I think, being the rating that it got at the time, which kept a lot of kids out of the theater. And then also all those things combined to not reach the audience that it was really kind of supposed to be, because the mid and older teenager kids went and saw the Lost Boys and thought it was cool, but that Monster Squad was a little too kid oriented for them because they were cool. And then all the preteens and young teenagers, it was a little dark, it was a little scary, it was a little the body count was a little high, to go to this movie, and so it missed out on them. And so that left this very small window of what we now know are tweens, which I think Monster Squad was definitely a tween movie at the time. And had anybody known that was a real thing, they could have marketed directly to that, let it breathe a little bit, get that word of mouth in the tween scene, and who knows what it would have done at the box office. But with that said, we've had a 30-something year life cycle with this movie that people still love. They still talk about it. We're talking about it today. There's not many movies that can say that, and it's been very, very interesting and certainly appreciated to be a part of that conversation for so long with something that really impacted a lot of people very, very deeply. And that's why I decided to make the documentary about that connection with the fans of why a movie that underperformed really changed lives.
Yeah, and the movie was so well written. That's the thing too. If people at the time didn't watch it, they really didn't get to see how great the movie was. Because, I mean, you talked about the Rudy character, and I always laugh about this. He's this cool guy, and he killed his dad. That was the big rumor and stuff like that. And yet, you guys are thinking about letting him into your club, and he has to pass all the tests. He's got to answer this or answer that. But the funny part is, he's this cool guy. So you're thinking, he's too cool to do this club. These are young kids. He could care less either way. But then they don't tell him if he's in the club or not. And he's kind of like, wait a minute, am I in the club or not? So you kind of see that he's still a kid at heart, because even though he's a cool guy, he still wanted to be part of this club. He wasn't too cool to be part of that club. So I always thought that those little elements in that movie were just awesome. And that was just so well written, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. And we've talked about that very thing, over the years, in panels and conversations and interviews and amongst ourselves. And, especially with, Ryan Lambert, who played Rudy, being that the Rudy character is the cool kid. He's kind of a badass. He comes in, literally on his, white horse and saves the day, and helps Horace, from the bullies. So he's automatically a good guy. Even though he's got all these kind of weird rumors about him and his family life, and his, he's a weird kid, and he's a little bit older. So why is he hanging around us? But I think if you actually, Ryan Lambert has some great ideas about Rudy, and the leather jacket and the glasses and the hair gel and the penny loafers and all the uniform of cool is really just a facade. It's a defense mechanism to a kid who, just like everybody else, is just looking for somewhere to fit in. Yeah. And he just happens to put on the leather jacket. Who knows what his family life was like? I doubt he killed his dad.
Right.
But, maybe his family life ain't so great. Maybe he's got a struggling parents, or maybe they're a split household. Maybe he gets abused at the house, used to be abused, who knows? there's so many things that a lot of kids related to that character. With that, Rudy's he's the most badass, but he's also probably the most vulnerable one of the whole group, because he's willing to let his true side come out while wearing the uniform of the cool kid, but is just looking to fit in somewhere too, because that's he doesn't want to be a loner.
Right, exactly. And I mean, think about some of the people you got to work with on that show. I think of the guy who played your dad, I believe
Stephen Mock.
Yeah, I mean, he had been in so many things. I mean, he was in shows like Knots Landing. He was in Dynasty, things like that. He had been working forever, and you're a young kid, and this is the guy that plays your father. You get to work with him. I mean, that had to just, looking back on it, I'm sure you were a young kid, you couldn't appreciate it then, but now you look back on it and you're like, wow, I got to work with Steven. That had to be awesome as well, because not only are you working with these guys, but you're learning from them as well.
No doubt. I mean, I think all the adults on this movie were just as top notch as you can get. Steven's fantastic. Not only his body of work, all through the 70s and 80s, coming up from that and having all this experience, but he really has this kind of this gravitas on screen, which you have gravitas on set. Not only, it's not just experience and skill, but it's actually this kind of intangible quality that some performers have, that some don't, and you can totally tell. And Steven's definitely one of those guys, those people that that have that kind of gravitas. And one thing is that's soothing, because it's a comfortable thing. You gravitate, you feel comfortable around it. It's heavy, and you feel confident that you're in good hands with somebody. But he's also a very kind of was giving guy. He tells stories about why he really liked doing this role, is because he was a dad of two young kids at the same time. So it was sort of parallel. And he was just like, I know how to, I've played all these other characters. I've played lawyers. I've played cops. I've played, cold, street guy in the streets of New York or whatever. But, Monster Squad was something that someone like Steven could relate his new experience as a father, and said, hey, I've got this. I know how to do this. But he was also sort of this burnt out cop, which he had played, in the past. And it just works, so well. And I think it was a great decision, and to have someone like Steven there, along with Mary Ellen Trainor, which is sort of the balance of these two parents. I always, Steven, I think, was, a perfect choice. But I think, coming out of Night of the Creeps the year before, and then Lethal Weapon was getting, written and made at the same time. And, both Fred and Shane had their hands in those projects. And, it's like, it almost seems like Tom Atkins, would have been, also a cool choice, as the Crenshaw father. But I think Steven just, knocked it out of the park, and was just this kind of force that, just works. It's a side character, but it's an important character.
Yeah.
And, kind of shows, because there was a lot more in the original scripts about the family dynamic with the Crenshaws in the Monster Squad story. And it got really dark, and we had a little more backstory to it, and what a lot of people related to, but a lot of people missed until they saw the movie a second or third time, is like, this family is like falling apart. Like, there's some heavy shit going on here.
Yeah.
And it's the story where this kind of grizzled, burnt out cop is trying to do his job, but his wife is unhappy, and his kids don't know what's going on, and they're caught in the middle. And then all of a sudden, Dracula comes to town and starts wrecking shit. So he's like, wait, what is happening? And I just thought everybody worked out great in there as the adults, in this movie.
One of the things, Andre, when I was watching the DVD, and you, Ryan, and Ashley were doing the commentary, and you're looking at the credits, and you guys kind of joked about this. You talked about a lady, Elise. She was like your teacher, and she kind of yelled at you guys a little bit. But what was really interesting to me was you don't realize how important those people behind the scenes are to making you guys do your jobs right. So even though I'm sure, like, as young kids, she probably drove you nuts a little bit, she did her job in the sense that she prepared you for this movie. So just talk about how important it is for people like that and the roles they have to make a movie successful.
Well, first of all, I've always felt that the people that you see on camera making a movie are the least important people in a movie. They are the least important. They are the easiest to replace, and because they're just actors, and sometimes they've got a certain look or a good look. Look, the actors are a dime a dozen. We really are, right?
Yeah.
And but it's the skilled people, it's the artisans, it's the writers, it's the it's the special effects crews, it's the makeup artists, it's the wardrobe costumers, the designers, it's the stunt coordinators, it's the grips, it's the electricians, and then filtering all the way down to the if you have kids on a set, you have to have a studio teacher there who is not just a studio teacher, but it's also the child welfare advocate on sets, per
Right.
law that you have to have. And depending on the age of the kids on set, everything's different, and there's different rules, and that person's got to be there to enforce those rules. It also helps with the actors unions and the California labor laws, and dealing with it's basically child labor. And this person is that advocate, and that person has an authoritative voice on set. And some are great and some aren't great, but Elise Gans, who you mentioned by name, was our teacher on Monster Squad, and she was fantastic. I mean, she had been doing it for a long time. She knew what she was doing, and she ran her part of that set, which wasn't just passing out our schoolwork, for our 3 hours a day in the schoolroom or the trailer that we did school in. But it was also there standing right next to the camera, watching, the action, watching the stuff, and making sure the welfare of the kids is her first priority. And if you're not on top of that, and you're not kind of a hard ass with that, then you're not doing your job very well.
Right.
And she was fantastic. And, she was a great teacher too. We learned a lot of stuff, and, did some adventures and had a good time. But she was pretty strict, and that means you're a good studio teacher. And, because there's some things that, producers or directors or stuntmen or things, want kids to do and put them in situations. And that person's there to say, that's not going to happen today. And then sometimes you got to misdirect them and go, hey, look over there, and then run over there and do this shot. But, that only happened a couple times. But Elise was fantastic, and, it was a great experience. And, some of my favorite people that I've ever worked with on, all the stuff that I've done, whether short-term or long-term or repeating on short-term things, are a handful of studio teachers that I've worked with, during my youth years. And Elise is one of the top ones.
Right. Exactly. For years, my friends and I would always talk about, when is this movie ever going to come out on DVD? I remember in 2002, when DVDs were really starting to be the new thing, we couldn't understand why this movie wasn't coming out. But I really believe this, Andre. I really believe that first comic con convention that you guys all went to, I think it was you, Ryan, Ashley, or whatever. So many fans showed up that day, and then you guys continued to do these conventions. I really think that helped get the movie on DVD, because the people that are in charge of putting that DVD together said, you know what, this thing will sell. We've got a following that we never could have envisioned. And I really think it was those Comic-Con conventions that really got that movie to DVD.
I think after it actually goes a little bit before that. And it's that the very first cast reunion screening out of the blue that we did at the Alamo Drafthouse in Austin, Texas in 2006.
Yeah.
All of it, because we had the internet at that time. The fan base came from all over to watch 2 sold out screenings on 35 millimeter. And no one had seen Monster Squad in the theater in 19 years or 20 years. And it was about 19 years, because then the DVD came out the next year for the 20th. But Fred at the time, and then got the fans working on literally a campaign. He's like, because that question came up at that Q&A. It's like, hey, when are we going to get our DVD? And the answer was never. No one knows that you want this movie, so start in the chat rooms and start writing letters to whoever owns the rights to Monster Squad. And that was sort of the problem for years, is no one knew who had the rights to Monster Squad to actually put it out, either theatrically and or on DVD. Or on cable at the time or whatever, because it was just sort of in a dead period. And the fans started writing, and they found it was Lionsgate. And, people like Sean Robert actually wrote 50 or 60 postcards, and sent them to the studios. And then the heads started kind of, turning towards the title. And, when we showed up at the very, very first convention that we actually ever appeared at was Monster Mania in Cherry Hill, New Jersey in 2007, is when we learned that there was going to be a DVD release by Lionsgate. And that weekend is when the production team actually put together the interviews and the commentary, when we were all very taken by surprise, because no one had notified us of that fact. And so that was sort of a weird weekend. First, going to this first convention that we'd ever been to, which ended up being the first of a few hundred, and and then having the DVD come out later that year, which we actually went to San Diego Comic-Con to actually launch, which was bonkers because that was set up by Lionsgate, who ended up putting out that DVD, who at the time had the rights to put out Monster Squad and made a killing on it in 2007, 2008. And it's because of those appearances and interfacing with that fan base, face to face, makes a big impact. And they've been waiting for this DVD for years, and they finally got it. So it sold out real quick, and then it was an out of print thing again very quickly.
Yeah, but I mean, those, like I said, those conventions. I mean, how rewarding it must have been for you, the other actors, because this was a movie that I'm sure as an actor, you move, like you said, you move on to different projects. You can't look back and think about stuff. But I'm sure there's always movies that you do sometimes where you say, that wasn't a good movie, no big deal. But there's movies that you really do, or there's TV shows you do. And you're like, it's unfortunate because I really liked playing this part. And when it doesn't do well, that's got to be disappointing. So this is kind of like in a lot of ways, the payback, because now you're seeing, here it is 15 years later since this came out on DVD, and you've been to a million conventions. This movie is, like I said, a cult following. It's a classic. I think of The Breakfast Club, which people still love today. So you have this movie that is always going to be a phenomenon forever.
And that's something that we talk about all the time when we started realizing exactly what that impact was, that it's not going to go away. We thought it would go away after about a year or two, but like, oh, this is a neat little, kind of pat on the back after 20 years. And it had not only hasn't stopped, it's just grown deeper and gotten larger and gone even further. And, hearing those stories and meeting those fans in the early days of the kind of appearance and the resurgence is, what kind of sparked the idea to realize that this is special and realize that these stories were a story. And that's why, I put it together to tell that story. And that's what Wolfman's Got Nards, the documentary ended up being about. It's really not about us. It's a little bit about the movie. It's about the experience of doing it, but it's about how something like a movie, in this case, the Monster Squad, can actually connect and impact somebody and change their lives, and stay with them until adulthood and further. And whether you are a fan in Florida, or whether you were, the guy that made the creature suit, or whether you were the kid that, shot the bow and arrow and killed all the monsters, everybody, was impacted by this movie in some way. And the fans are the only ones that kept it alive, for the dead 20 years. And then when it exploded in 2006, 2007, look what it led to. Like you said, we've done a million conventions. We get to go to special screenings. It's had 2 different Blu-ray releases, another 4K release is coming out. We got to make a documentary about it. It's loved all over the world. We have fan bases in Germany and France and Spain and in the UK and in Mexico and in Japan and Australia. And, who doesn't think that's cool? That's if you do, then you're looking at it wrong and you're not appreciating what it is.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Andre. What the biggest thing it did, just on a personal level, is you reconnected with Ryan, you reconnected with Ashley, because I'm sure when you guys stopped doing that movie after you shot it in probably 86 and it came out in 87, you guys probably didn't see each other for years. And look at the friendships you've made. You and Ryan have that podcast that you've been doing forever. You and Ryan are always doing something together. So you were able to renew those friendships. So just talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, no doubt. And really what that does is that comes back to kind of the spirit of what Monster Squad's all about is, finding your people, finding your tribe, and, being able to reconnect. And I hadn't talked, this movie came out when I was 14. So we had a couple more years of me being in junior high and then high school, and Ryan's a year older than I am. And, so we hung out and palled around for a couple of years, but then I ended up going to college. And so I kind of disconnected from the industry and a lot of my friends, because you're just not down the street from them, because I went far away and went and existed in a completely different world for a number of years. And, and then, a number of years after that to, come back and, like you said, reconnect with, people like Ashley, who I had just out of the blue had started to communicate with about 6 months before we had that first screening.
Yeah.
And hadn't talked to Fred or Shane in a couple of years. They, we used to always stay in touch and go to lunch or go to birthday parties, things like that. But once this resurgence started, and we were all in the same room again, and it was really sort of like me, Ashley, and Ryan, and Fred would join every once in a while. That just kind of re-strengthens that the those kind of connections and those bonds that we made as kids, and just took it further. And Ryan and I just we're very, very different individuals, but we're very similar in many ways, and we get a sense of humor. Then we just get a kick out of each other, and I thought we were a great kind of duo, doing fun stuff and hosting things like the podcast that we had for a while, or co-hosting a show that I created called Short Ends, that we sold to Legendary Studios and Nerdist, Nerdist brand, where we celebrate short films and interview the filmmakers. And we traveled around and hosted film festivals and things. And we're really, really together as a trio. We're either just Ryan and I. And you spend so much time with each other, and then you see it like in the documentary where we go on these crazy road trips, for in 17 cities in 17 days and such, and you can finish each other's sentences, and the jokes, and we trade off telling the jokes in front of an audience, and that's unique. Not very, very few people get to experience something like that with people as cool as Ashley and Ryan. And Fred and Shane, and you're just very fortunate to be a part of that.
And for me as a fan, and I'm sure I'm not alone, it was very nice to see people like yourself and Ryan kind of get that spotlight again, because like you said, I look at Ryan, for instance. He was a teen idol. He was on a show called Kids Incorporated that I watched as a kid, and he had the leather jacket on that show, and he was just so popular. I mean, a lot of people watch shows for different reasons. I watched because I really wanted to be Ryan Lambert. I thought he was so cool. But then after like Kids Incorporated, Monster Squad, he kind of disappeared from acting for a long time. Then he started doing some music, and now he's kind of back in the spotlight. And I really attribute a lot of that to these conventions, to these screenings and stuff like that, because a whole new generation got to see people like Ryan Lambert. And then for you as well, Andre, I mean, you had went to college, you disappeared from acting for a while, and now look at the stuff that's happened to you since these conventions and stuff. It's kind of, allowed people to see, wow, that this guy was a tremendous actor, and you guys are getting to be recognized again, when for a while you kind of fell off the radar a little bit.
Yeah, and that's just gravy. We're fortunate enough, as when we were kids and teenagers, to have some success and some notoriety or some celebrity, so to speak. And then you go and do the things that you desire or that you need to do, and for a lot of people it ends there. People don't get kind of like a circle back, and kind of a resurgence like we did, and it's fascinating and super appreciative of it. And if anybody's wondering, Ryan Lambert is still the coolest dude in the room. And he's just got a few more gray hairs in his beard. Don't we all? But you mentioned these conventions and the screenings, and those screenings and those conventions don't exist without the fans that attend them. And so it's a combination of those opportunities and then the response by the fans, who become your friends, and because they become part of the squad and they become part of your, kind of family going forward, that are about the most loyal people, and, the coolest people that you could, want, being, having your back and being part of your army. And, it's just fascinating. And, like I said, that was what we wanted to look at, in the documentary, and really kind of like shine a light on the fans, on that dynamic of, kind of this resurgence that not a lot of people get, and show a little appreciation, and then, show a little bit that we all love it, that we all love being a part of it.
Right. Andre, we obviously know that life is very vulnerable and nothing is guaranteed, but we almost had a scare with you a year or two ago, probably 3 years now, but, you had a heart issue that you didn't even know about. There really weren't any symptoms at the time. So just talk about that a little bit, because thankfully you're here with us, but it was almost touch and go right there.
No doubt. It was, almost 2 years ago to the day, because July 3rd of 21, I was playing tennis with my best friend in Vegas, Mike. And, I've always been an athletic guy. I've always been kind of healthy, and, we had been kind of in the house for, a year and a half or so, even though, trying to stay active. And I was playing tennis on a Saturday morning and felt a little weird at one point after playing for about an hour, and it just didn't get better. And my buddy Mike was right there with me and realized something was also not good, and decided to get me in the car and get me to a place where I could get looked at, and ended up having to get rushed by ambulance to a trauma center because I had a massive heart attack on July 3rd, the Saturday morning, and my right coronary artery ruptured, and and then when that happens, heart attacks are very, very common, unfortunately, with humans, but when your coronary artery ruptures, it has a hole in it, and so your body wants to plug that hole with a clot, and the clot grows so big that it shuts off that artery, and that's the heart attack. And it almost took me out. And so I got to where I needed to be by the skin of my teeth, due to Mike, his diligence in getting me out of there and getting me to this first place to get looked at, and then that team of doctors and nurses doing work to get me to where I needed to be, to where I could be saved. And into a trauma center and a cath lab and a surgeon working in the catheterization lab and fixing the problem before it was too late. And I luckily got in where I needed to be with the people I needed to be with in the nick of time.
Yeah, and I mean that it was a scary thing, but fortunately you were okay. And I mean that's just the thing too, is that you learn, when you get in your 40s, it's always important to get the necessary tests done. You may not have any symptoms, but they say it all the time: get the colonoscopy, get the prostate exam, get
Yep.
the heart exam and stuff like that, because you realize that a lot of times there's just no symptoms for things. And I mean, thankfully you're okay, but I mean, and you're doing well today. I mean, you feel great and stuff. Are you playing tennis again, or?
I don't think I've actually played tennis since then, but I'm a big golfer anyway. So I'm a golfer. I'm a golf and yoga guy, and I go on good walks. So I can do whatever I want to. I'm clear to do it. I'm in really good shape. That the heart got the rupture got repaired. I have a stent. I'm only on 3 medications that are just kind of average. And, just kind of preventing the next one is really what it is, because I have a genetic predisposition to this. And that's another thing that a lot of people don't know. Understand your family history, understand yourself, learn how to listen to your own body. I'm kind of in tune, with my shell and my internal workings, always have been. I ran, there was probably a combination of about 4 or 5 things that led up to that Saturday morning. But you're absolutely right. Once you get to a certain age, which it's, 35, 40, you need to start paying attention to things that are the, kind of the major indicators and major things. And, go get your regular checkups. Don't put it off. One of the things that's super important that leads to a lot of stuff is, good dental care, actually. So have good dental care, which, always have for years. And go to your doctor, go to a specialist. If you think something's just off or different than it was 5 years ago, it very well may be. So I came up with a turn of phrase that said, "You'd rather be wrong than too late." And you don't have to be paranoid or a hypochondriac or scared of something. Just just do the due diligence, and if you think something's different, then take the extra step. And I've had a lot of people, since I've been talking about it a lot over the last 2 years, say, "Hey, I thought this was a problem and I went and had it checked. It's not, but we saw something else that very well could have been. And I wouldn't have gone if I hadn't heard you talk about it or know your story." And so now I've got kind of a new role, and I've got, sort of an awareness and a conversation kind of position and platform to kind of talk from. And, it's important. And there's a lot of, don't not like your doctors, some aren't the best doctors, but there's some really, really good healthcare professionals out there that are looking out for you. But your biggest healthcare advocate is yourself, and you've got to take care of yourself. Don't abuse yourself in different ways, and just do the minor basic things, and you can go a lot longer than you think you can. But and that's lifestyle choices. I'm not trying to police anybody's life, But lifestyle is important. How you treat yourself, how you treat your body is important. But it's always a distant second to genetics.
Yeah.
And if you understand your background, your family history, or if you have a comprehensive genetic profile done, you can kind of look at some warning indicators and get ahead of some serious stuff that can take you out down the line.
Right. And that really is important. The genetics play a big part in it. Before we go, Andre, I mean, you've had so many great things happening in your life, but what would you say the most rewarding thing to you has been throughout your career, if you had to pick one?
Probably just because of really the kind of overall story. I've had a lot of great experiences, worked with, some of the best people in the world. Some I'm still in contact with, some are not around anymore. And these are all great stories. I think coming in second is growing up at a time and having this kind of notoriety and celebrity as you're a teenager, and knowing that very, very small amount of people on the planet get that opportunity. So that's very cool. So you can enjoy that. You can trade on it a little bit. You can win trivia games at the bar. Some knowledge that you have. But and kind of tied into that. But what I would say, if I had to pick an answer, is the realization that you were right about something with these Monster Squad fans and fans in general of movies and TV shows and music that get impacted by art. And having this idea, working with this great team at Pilgrim Media Group, led by my man Henry McComas and Wes Caldwell and Aaron Kunkel and Shane Patterson, and having this group of production people work on this documentary project for a year, because I knew there was something there, and I wasn't able to do it by myself. And I had this awesome team of people work with me and pull that out of the ether and have this documentary, which I knew could impact people, have this amazing impact on the fans that actually watch this and go, "You made this is me. This is me, and this is how I feel about X, Y, and Z, and this is why this documentary means so much to me." And I think we as a team that made Wolfman's Got Nards knocked it out of the park. And I am the least responsible for it. It's the team of people that jumped on and really helped make that come together. And that's probably the most fulfilling at this point and rewarding thing that I've seen.
Well, Andre, I want to thank you for giving me a few minutes today. It was a real honor for me. Been wanting to do this for a long time.
Yeah, glad we
Again,
connected.
yeah, congratulations on what has been a very successful career, which I know is just going to keep going. But thank you for giving myself and fans everywhere so many great moments throughout your career. We really appreciate it. And I really applaud you for not only the actor you are, but for the person you are as well, because you've had to persevere in some tough situations, and you've come out of it like a real winner. So I do applaud you for that. And thank you again for coming on.
Well, Mike, I'll take that. I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm glad we finally got to connect after some delays and starts. And looking forward to the next time. And we'll talk about something else. And all your listeners and viewers, appreciate you hanging out for a little bit. See you next time.
Well, believe me, it was well worth the wait. And folks, there you have it, the one and only Andre Gower. And he may always be known first for the Monster Squad, but you know what? For fans like myself, we're proud of that, and we're just fine with that. So for In the Spotlight, I'm Mike Kenichi. He's Andre Gower saying goodbye, everyone.